Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 157 of Humanity Rising. Humanity Rising is an initiative of Ubiquity University and over 350 partnering organizations that have come together with Ubiquity during this extraordinary pandemic we're all undergoing to create a sacred space, a global commons, so that each day people from around the world can come together to share their experiences and their solutions, their visions, and their strategies for making a better world. It's been an exhilarating experience. As you all know, this is going to be our final week. This is our second to the last session before we break for the holidays. We'll be resuming on the 11th of January, and of course, we'll be sending out communications and keeping everyone informed. But it's been one of the great experiences of my life, actually, day in and day out, welcoming you. And we've had well over 700 speakers and all kinds of subjects. And we've been able to report on unfolding events. As you know, the situation with the coronavirus is very, very complicated. Country after country, and many countries that dealt with the virus successfully in the spring are succumbing. Other countries who didn't do much at all have rates that are literally going off the charts. The United States in the last 24 hours, for example, suffered 3,053 deaths. That's a death every 30 seconds. And every single state and community in the country is now in the red zone. And Christmas is approaching, Hanukkah, the New Year's, the solstice, a time when we just really want to be with our families and celebrate these deeply important holy days, and the pandemic is precluding that. And so all of us are being challenged in ways that we've probably never been in our lifetime to try to sort out how to correctly be safe, healthy, respectful at a time when we're all in lockdown. And some countries around the world and many communities are at stay-at-home orders. We're all wearing masks. We're all engaging in social distancing. The first vaccines, as you all know, began to be rolled out first in Great Britain a few days ago. We'll see how that works. There are complications of the vaccines in terms of infrastructure of delivery and success in adaptation and so forth. We'll see, as we were discussing the other night, if 2020 was the year of COVID, 2021 is going to be the year of the vaccines. And we'll see how those work and whether they work and whether the pandemic will be stilled. We have some good news today. The New York State Pension Fund, one of the largest in the world, a $226 billion pension fund. They announced that by 2025, they're going to completely withdraw any investments in oil and gas. This is the largest pension fund in the world to take this kind of action. So like Amsterdam in May that announced it was going to embrace donut economics, and the Chilean people in October that wrote a new constitution mandating that 50% of the new governance for that country will be women. We have reasons for hope as we draw the year to a close. I want to invite you all now to just take a moment before we commence our program to take a few deep breaths and close your eyes and place your attention on your heart and see if you can actually listen to your heartbeat in a spirit of gratitude and thanksgiving for simply being alive at this most extraordinary moment in human affairs. Thank you, everyone. Now, with an open heart, I want to commence our program by saying first that, at Ubiquity, we have a saying that guides our councils and our activities much of the time, and that is to proceed until apprehended. We don't ask for permission much at Ubiquity. We just do what we feel needs to be done for our students, for the integrity of learning. That's in the spirit in which we launched Humanity Rising. We just felt it was the right thing to do, and we just went out and did it. We believe you should just proceed until apprehended. And it's in that spirit that I want to really welcome the program today. This was, as you know, the keystone of Buckminster Fuller. He says the only way to really transact change is not to battle the old order, but to create the new order. And so we thought, as we end the year, what better way than to celebrate the transition movement, which is now a global movement, started in the UK, as many as you know, some years ago. And it is comprised of communities, large and small, off-grid, intentional communities, towns, cities, organizations that are simply transitioning, that understand that they have an obligation to the future, and rather than waiting for big governments or big institutions to transact the change, they're just doing it. And it is one of the most inspiring examples of the kind of change that is so desperately needed in the world today. I can't actually think of a more inspiring example because it is concrete actions in real time that are building the future. So we want to welcome Jul Bystrova, who's been involved since 2008 in the transition movement in the United States and involved globally. So Jul, I want to welcome you to the program. And she's brought together today a number of people, and we were just speaking in the green room before we started the session that next year we want to have a much deeper dive into the transition movement, because it's pointing the way to the future at a time of great darkness and confusion and fake news and manipulation and Facebook and all kinds of extraordinary challenges to truth. That there are people that are walking their talk and exemplifying what the future could look like. So Jul, thank you for joining us, and I turn the program over to you.
Thank you so much for that amazing introduction to transition, Jim. That was, I almost feel like I don't need to say much more, although there is plenty more to say. And hopefully we will fill this next time, this next hour, a little more than an hour, with a lot of really interesting details about what's happening in transition right now, since it began back in 2005 in the UK, where a group of people came together and just asked themselves and each other, what kind of world do we want to live in? You know, how do we get there? Just imagining that. And they've been imagining that ever since. And it's grown, of course, now to, I'm sure one of my panelists will be able to give the exact number of countries that it's grown to, because I don't know, but it's all over the world. And it is constantly changing and evolving, because it is really very much about boots on the ground work that we need to do in the world today in order to live in the future world that we want to dream together. And that future world is a world that is weaned off of what we call the fossil fuel economy. It's not dependent on that anymore. It is going towards local resources, local food, local economies, building community, building connections, real connections to the land that each of us live on, and to our local communities, and how we work together. And so that's why transition is different everywhere, because it's really connected to our local community in real time. So we're going to hear from sort of representatives of a few major countries, Brazil, and Philippa is in Belgium. So she will be speaking to, well, I guess Europe, and Dawn is here from the US. So although there are many, many other leaders, I'm really, really honored and excited to have these three here to speak to the transition movement. And I want to just give you a very short little video as an introduction that is off of the Transition Network site from UK. And it's a 2-minute video, which pretty much sums up the history of transition. And then we will go to I'll introduce our panelists, and we will hear them. All right, so I'm going to share my screen.
In 2006, an idea was born. What would a community-led response to the big challenges the world faces look like? A group of people in a small town started playing around with a set of principles, tools and values drawn from many great social change and cultural development movements of the past, but uniquely adapted to and refocused on the unique setting of now. They called it transition. They were clear that this was an experiment that needed people trying things out where they were and sharing both their successes and their failures. That first transition town unleashed itself in 2006. People in other places, initially in the UK and very rapidly further afield, started to hear about what they were doing and wanted to do it too. It started to spread. It began popping up all over the place, at first in small towns, then in urban neighbourhoods, in universities, on islands, in all kinds of unexpected places. A small charity called Transition Network was created to inspire, encourage, connect, support, nurture and train this rapidly growing network. Inspired by this approach, people started growing food in unexpected places, creating new food businesses, community energy companies, local currencies, and so much more that we'll just show you some images that give a sense of the breadth of what they're doing. They began learning how to run effective groups, work together and share their learnings. They poured their creativity and commitment into exploring together the changes they wanted to see and getting stuff to happen within themselves, within their group and across their neighbourhood. The idea began spreading internationally from Bologna to Brazil, from Japan to Pasadena. It won awards, ran amazing international conferences, and national hub organisations began forming to support the spread in nearly 30 countries. It appeared on television, radio and films, and even inspired novels and a musical. Its power as a dynamic tool for inspiring bottom-up, community-led action has been noted by politicians, researchers, and many others. It has real impacts on people's lives, putting care and the creation of healthy communities at its heart. Many, many people are involved and are doing amazing things. Where might it go next? Well, that's kind of up to you.
So I am very honored again to welcome our panelists today. And apologies. Have to, my YouTube wanted to keep going. So yes, I'm very, very honored to welcome the panelists today. And yeah, Blues Traveler, right? That's a good background music. I will say one thing. When I came into transition back in 2008, what attracted me to it was just, you know, it was just people just rolling up their sleeves and just doing stuff. And it felt so healthy, because a lot of us sit around and, you know, talk about how bad things are and like, oh my God, what's going to happen to the world, and depression and despair. And then some of us just said, well, let's just do what we can. And we did. And I have to say that I just felt so much inspiration just from the little things like growing a garden, that that's why I got involved and why I've been involved ever since, because to me, it's pretty much the only game in town. We don't have to call it transition, but it is the work of transitioning out of the world that we don't want to live in anymore, that's broken, the systems that are broken, that are ruining the environment and disconnecting us from each other and the earth, to a system that is more connected to the earth and to each other. And that's really what transition is. So the panelists we have here are, I'm going to, let's see, bring up the bios. And we've got Monica Picavilla, hopefully I said that right, Don Hall, and Felipa Pimentel. And we're Don Hall is somebody that I've known for a while now and been working with, and really, really honored to have him here. He's just an amazing leader in the Transition US movement. He's been participating in it in a variety of capacities over the past decade. He's served for 2 years as education outreach coordinator for the Transition Colorado. And he went on to found a Transition Sarasota. And during that time, he delivered more than 60 transition talks, screened over 40 films for Future, hosted dozens of reskilling workshops, and hopefully he'll be able to speak about what reskilling is. He led an effort that harvested nearly 250,000 pounds of organic produce from local farms for those in need. He organized annual community-wide Eat Local Week celebrations and compiled a Eat Local guide. He's a certified transition trainer and experienced facilitator, and he was named the co-director of Transition US in 2017, and he now serves as the interim director of Transition US. Our fearless leader, previous leader, Caroline Staten, retired this last year, and he has stepped into that role. He holds a master's degree in environmental leadership from Naropa University, and he currently lives in Boulder, Colorado. He just moved there. Felipa Pimentel works for the Transition Network, and she helps to connect, support, and train communities worldwide as they self-organize around the transition model. She's the international coordinator of the Transition National Hubs, and is exploring with people all over the world how to develop the social infrastructure, the collaborative culture, and new forms of leadership capable of supporting a distributed movement for social change. Felipa is a Portuguese forest scientist by training. And back in 2000, she went to Brussels to join an internship at European Commission. And for a period of 10 years, she worked in EU institutions and organizations related to sustainable development as a political advisor. And she's done work related to EU policy, but then she quit to dedicate herself fully to the transition movement. So we are really, transition is really benefiting from her amazing experience. And she lives in Brussels with a big piece of her heart in Portugal. And Monica Picavia is a Brazilian educator with masters in sustainability. She is an official trainer of Gaia Education and Transition Towns, and she's a fellow of Rockefeller Foundation on their social innovation project with Stockholm Resilience Center. She facilitates Transition Brasilandia, which is the first transition town project in a favela in the world. And that, I'm hoping she will speak something about that, because I think that's really incredible. She's worked since 1989 with low-income and traditional communities looking for their development as volunteers in social and humanitarian projects. She has a company that today helps companies to have better relationships with their stakeholders, working, co-creating their development on a shared territory. She's won 19 prizes of sustainability in Brazil, and she's written 2 children's books with the themes of inclusion, and she's the mother of twin girls. So welcome to the panel, all of you. And I'm going to start off. The first question is really basically, let's get just to know about each of you a little bit. The first question is just, what compelled you to join this movement? And what are maybe what are some of the most surprising or significant things that you've seen or learned about the movement? And I'm going to go ahead and just turn it over now to Dawn to answer the question.
Great. Well, lovely to be here with all of you. I first came across transition when I was going to graduate school here in Boulder, Colorado. I had moved across the country to explore the possibility of working on climate change full time, as it was something that I was already doing as a volunteer. I saw it as one of the biggest and most pressing challenges in our world. But I didn't know how that was going to look. I had been involved with many past social change initiatives, around the Students for Free Tibet, anti-globalization and anti-war movements, and passing progressive climate legislation. But none of them really felt like I could put my whole heart and soul into it until I came across transition. And I was just really impressed when I began learning about it, about the kind of the breadth of the analysis, the historical analysis of kind of where we are right now in the arc of history, and the kind of changes that we need to make, how holistic its vision was, how it showed how all the pieces of local food and local energy, local economy, governance, housing, education, healthcare, how all these things could fit together and comprise a whole new way of life, a whole alternative to the increasingly destructive status quo that we see in our world today. And I was really encouraged also by the kind of can-do spirit that Jul was talking about earlier, and that Jim was talking about with his proceed until apprehended comment, that we get out there, we come together as communities, and we actually create the future that we want to see now. And that's something that, particularly back in 2008, when I first got involved, I didn't see a lot of other places. That kind of focus on positive, constructive local solutions, what has sometimes been referred to as tiny microcosms of hope. Now I see a lot more of that in our world today. But when transition was first getting going, that was pretty scarce. A lot of focus on the political, a lot of focus on the personal, but what about that big middle space of what we can do when we come together as communities? So, I'm extremely encouraged about the future of this movement and the larger movement of movements of which transition finds itself a part. I think, we're currently in the kind of early stages of this transition, of this transformation. What we've seen up until now is that we've been very far ahead of the curve, and that media, politics, funding, all those things have been kind of going in the other direction. From where transition is headed, supporting these kind of crumbling, trying to shore up these crumbling institutions of ours. But I think, we've been seeing here in 2020, and we'll see even more in years to come, that the status quo is just not an option any longer. And people will be searching for alternatives. I see that more and more. And we just need to assure that the kind of compassionate, visionary, creative, life-bringing, empowering alternative that's represented by Transition and many other organizations around the world is on the table. That is an option that people see for our community going forward, and that they have some kind of experience of that, some experience of using a local currency and getting their food from a local farmer, working together with their neighbors on a common project. I think that will make all the difference in terms of how we go forward. If we can see that these changes are not something to be feared, but something to be embraced as some great possibility.
Wow, thank you so much, Don. That was really well said. So, Philippa, I'd love to pass the mic over to you and hear what compelled you to join the transition movement? What would you like people to know?
Thank you. I told the story before in this context, but let me just say that a lot of what Don said, it's really what I felt as well. But in my, personally, what happened to me was that in my childhood, I can say that I was lucky to have two grandparents with whom I grew up with the early stages of my life. And they were very special people that passed me a lot of principles and values that I later recognized as permaculture values and principles. And permaculture is in the, it's in the birth of transition as well. So for me to say that as I grew up and I was drawn into learning things that I really, I see my life in like intuition, stepping in, learning stuff that I didn't know. So that's why I went to forest science. It is in my studies were about restoration of nature systems. So it was a little bit different from the production. And then I went to Brussels because I didn't know anything about politics and policy, EU policy. I wanted to learn. And then suddenly I was the EU political advisor for Greenpeace. So I was working there, and then I came back to the institution. So I've been doing this kind of path naturally without big strategy developing where I wanted to go. But what happened to me was one day, a friend of mine in Portugal contacted me saying, in our region, it was really a big crisis. There was this big crisis, and they felt, this group of friends, they really felt that we needed to do something. They needed to do something, but they didn't know what, because it did not feel right to have this kind of isolated activities. And I spoke with a friend of mine that at the time she was the head of the Sustainable Development Observatory in Europe. And she said, why don't you see this video? It's a guy came to talk with us, in a conference, and he's called Rob Hopkins. And when I saw it, I said, it just clicked. So I said, this is it. So I told them that I wanted to be part of it. So 6 months later, I quit my job as a crazy woman. And we talked, Jim and I, about that already. And I started my transition path. And for me, people asked me why. And like I said, I really agree with Don. There was something very novel about all about all the processes and everything. But for me, it was not something, it is just like it is. It was my truth. I felt that I needed to step in it, so that I felt home. There was something about, in my work as political advisor in other organizations I worked with, there was something about the rigorous professionally, very rigorous, very solid knowledge, but at the same time, compassion about what transition is, and everyone is in a path for transition, but we are all in different stages. And this systemic and complexity, the fact that we say we don't know, let's see, let's try, let's fail, and the stories about what we do are in human scale. We don't have to be perfect talking about these huge projects, because in fact they are not it's not possible for people to do the same, most of us, and transition needs to be done by all of us. And the learning for me of accepting imperfection, accepting my own imperfection, my own lack of knowledge, and seeing it is so refreshing, and so it leaves so much space for real learning and real thinking outside of the box. Because if you are really doing it so much effort to prove that you are right, you are just closing down to what is outside of the box. And to make real change, you just need to look outside of your little box.
Thank
And
you.
at the same time, I'm going just to finish.
Okay.
Thank you, Jul. It is really important to be in that space of compassion. That's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Felipa. That I love that you ended talking about that. It's such a vital part of transition is that heart. So thank you so much for sharing that. And Monica would love to hear what drew you to transition.
Well, transition for me, it's like a passion, I think. What I believe is that most of time I worked with communities since I was 15 years old, and low-income communities, because they call me, this is a call, I always had it, so I love it. And on my professional work, I used to work with many different companies. And in one moment, I met Gaia Education that brought me to this permacultural way of thinking, and it was really something that wake me up and make me feel alive, like something that touched my heart, as the community used to do. So I look at that and say, well, I need it. And it was connected to the Eco Village work, and then I looked to that, to all that knowledge that I was learning and everything. And I said, well, okay, but I can't go to an eco village and leave all this thing that's the city. And how can we work with that? How can I bring it? So I learned, I heard about a man that was working with transition towns in Totnes. And I was pregnant with the girls. And there was one training that Naresh was going to do. That was the first one that was not in Totnes, that was in Norwich, that's near London. And I looked at that and said, well, I think I have to go now, because with the girls, it was be harder. So I talked to my husband and he said, are you crazy? You're going with 2 babies on the belly to Totnes? No, not to Totnes, to Norwich. It's near London. And then he said, well, go on, girl. I think everything go. And I used to say, my world is perfect. And say, and as your world is perfect, go on, it's going to work. So I went there and I did this training, and it was amazing. And then with that knowledge, I could bring it to Brazil with 2 more people. That was Frank Siciliano and Marcelo Todescan. And when I came to Brazil, I was working in Brasilândia. That's a pretty low-income community that we call favela. There are many different ways, but they like to be nominated by favela. That's a beautiful story. And then I look at that, and I talk to Isabella, that today take care of the hub of Brazil, and that's always with me together and working. And she started the transition Granja Viana where she lives, and it's a success. And I told her I would like to try to talk to people from Brasilândia to maybe start a transition movement there. And she looked at me, are you crazy, right? Are you kidding me, right? And she said, it's not gonna work. And when she say it's not gonna work, that make me feel, oh, that's the place where I wanna be. Because it's not gonna work is something that you can't say if you're not trying, So let's try it, why not? And then she said, who's gonna help you with that? And I told her, you will. I will, for sure. You are always with me, we have to do it. So we started this work there. And then maybe later I can tell a little bit more of that. And what brings me to that is that I can connect 2 passions. That's work with low-income community, something that work with equity, you know, that can promote equity and that can empower people. For me, the most interesting thing is that you look to people and say, okay, we can solve our problems. We can look to our place and do what we can with what we have. And this is pretty much empowerment for everything. And I think that's what brought me so much and make the success of Brasilândia. And that's what transition means to me, means my whole life and everything.
Thank you, Monica. Wow. Okay. Well, so let's just ask a few little more details about the transition movement from each of you. And I have a different question for each of you. And Felipa, I'd like to start with you and ask you if you could just share a little bit about how the systems of transition are being organized and how that reflects the values of transition.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if I should talk about the values as well, if you want me to do that, but one of the very first principles is that we support resource limits and we try to create resilience, local resilience. So this means what? That this makes me go to the first step of introducing how the movement is and organized. The movement is about all these local communities that just do, and they address the global problems at their context, at their level, local level. And one of the things that they do is they experiment about those things, and they will do that experimentation with the energy that they have. So if it's the group who chooses what they want to do, there is a set of principles and values, but no one is going to tell them what to do. So it's a decentralized movement. One of the things that happens with this decentralization is that you are not really obliged to register in a website to be part of the movement. So a lot of the movement we don't know for sure that is there. So it's like an universe that we cannot control. We don't want to control it, but most of it we cannot control because we don't know about it, So it's a particular movement. But those that want to be registered, they do it because there is this very important thing. We are like, imagine we all agree that the world needs to change, and we need to change, right? And we are experimenting. So we don't know because we are experimenting solutions for old problems. So we need to do stuff and fail, and we share the results, right? So imagine that we are a global international laboratory of change. So when we register, we are connected to other initiatives that are doing the same. And with our stories, we share what works, what doesn't work, and we share inspirational stories for other people that will start doing stuff as well. And it is so rooted to the contexts that transition is so different all over the world, right? So in Japan, it's not the same in the same way as in Australia, in Portugal, in Spain, etc., etc. So we have these two big things. One is two circles, one that we don't know what it is, and then you have a smaller circle of the initiatives that are registered and connected like, a big international network, but still decentralized and people experimenting and celebrating the change that is happening in their space. But then all this learning that is distributed, it has been collected by people that have these roles of supporting the movement. And that structure started to be Transition Network, that is the supporting structure organization that gives support and gives the energy for this flow of knowledge and collects things and reads about emergence, what is going on, and gives feedback to the movement again, and gathers resources where people can go and drink from. But the problem with the movement has been developing is that Transition Network based in UK would never be capable of supporting a growing movement like it is now. And mainly, as not wanting to be a bottleneck, wants to free capacity, and at the same time, as rooted in local context, it is so important for people to free the knowledge about culture, about language, to protect the diversity and so on. And one structure in UK would be a little bit like you would have to harmonize everything. And this is against the principles of the movement. So that's how we created the power that Transition Network had was given to the networks in territories and countries. And so a new level was created. There was networks in countries and territories doing peer-to-peer support and having this, what we call the hubs, right? So there are at the moment 25 official hubs from Brazil, Japan, Australia, etc., etc. And all of those have a circle of hubs, that is the hubs group. And then there is a heart circle that supports that. And there are several circles at the moment that are developing projects. So there is the training circle, there is the inner transition circle that Jul is part of. There is the municipalities in transition circle. So, and it has been becoming more and more complex, more and more professionalized. And a very, very important thing that I would like to share with you all is that, and I will finish after that, there is something that is very important about one of the values of transition. We should, and we have the intention to embody the change that we want to see in the world. One of the big problems we see in the world is governance. So one of the things that we did, it was to start changing the culture of our structures in the movement. And as it is decentralized and no one is there to give an order to all the movement to do a certain thing, we experiment in our circles and we try to share the culture until the ground, till the ground. So what we did, it was to be accompanied by an Université du Nou, and we shifted to shared governance, sociocracy and allocracy, a mix, and we completely changed our way of governance that is now spreading to the circles and so on. So this is how we work.
Thank you, Filipa. And if people want to learn more about the governance, you can go to Transition Network and click on the link there. They have a wonderful visual of the circles and circles, so I recommend that. And Monica, I would love to ask you this question. I'm especially interested in the answer to this. It's all so fascinating, everything that's been spoken. But the economy is such a hot topic, and I'm really curious, Monica, because you've worked a lot in that area, how the transition movement meets the needs of those who have been forgotten or marginalized by the current economy, the fossil fuel economy, and And then also how the transition could possibly appeal or meet the needs of those that are profiting from the fossil fuel economy, because obviously we need to shift their mindset as well. So would you, I know that's a big question. Probably could take a whole hour in itself, but if you could sum your thoughts up in 5 minutes, that would be awesome.
Yeah, that's a really big question. But what I believe when we talk about transition and economy, I think we lost the track of what money is, you know. And that's something interesting, because money became something by itself, and it's really something to help on exchanges. And what transition bring to us back, how money can be something different and how it can help really the exchanging. And what I really feel when we talk about equity and low-income communities and about transition on this topic, for people that you said that was not benefit by the fossil fuel, is something interesting, because you know, I used to say when I arrived to Brasilandia that it was a place where we can see some people with lower how can I say that, a lower consume, you know, like of many things, and a lower footprint. That's the word I was looking for, a lower footprint. And when we look at that, we were there just thinking that we were going to tell and bring them some new things. And then you can look at them and say, well, how can I learn to have a smaller footprint with them? You know what I mean? And what do they need? They don't need what we need. It's really different. Why transition made sense for them? Because when they look at them, they can see in really economy, how I can look at it and see resources. I don't have money, is not having resources. And that's something that changed their mindsets. So when you look to something that you don't have, and you believe that sometimes you don't need it, that's a big change of mind. You know, that's a change of mindset. And so they get empowered because they have things that they didn't believe that was resource and richness. So I think transition bring this awareness and look at them and make them think how to solve their problems with what they have, and what do they have, so they can see it, that many times they can't see, because most of what they see and think is that it's lack of things, you know. And then you look at them and say, well, you are rich of community connections, you are rich of how to plant things, you have knowledge here that you can use and share, and it can make resilience for you, you can plant food around you. And they never thought about that, because they think, how can I plant food? Doesn't make sense. And then you look at them, no, you can't do it, but we don't have a space. Okay, you can use your wall. How can I use my wall? So then you start showing things and doing things, and people look at that and say, oh my God, I have a place to, I have richness where I thought that was only lack, you know. And this is something that really is amazing when we talk about equity, because we used to look to people and just see the lack. And when you look to people and you see the richness, and you look at them and you see how they are empowered, how they can do things, how they have this hard power to do things, it's something that changed their mindset and then make them take care of their own lives. And it's really something that changed a place. And Brasilandia was like this. You know, I couldn't arrive there and just talk about, you know, like fossil fuel crisis, because for them, it was not something that was visible. So what was visible to them? This empowerment was visible to them when we start talking, and the climate change, because they had many floods there. The climate is changing. So I look at that and say, I'm not talking about fossil fuel, but I'm talking about climate change. And what can we do not to have climate change, and to create resilience, and to talk about the economy and make things that make sense for them. And that's transition for me. I think in each place we can find things that can make sense for us in that territory. And I love this that Filipa said, that we go to our place and look to what we have and create our own solutions with what we have. And so that's why they are amazing and they are different everywhere. I don't know. It's a piece of answer, but I think that's something that people can understand a little bit of how we feel when we look to a community of favelas and see how they are empowered and how transition can help them.
Thank you so much. That is so inspiring. And I love the way you shared about that. I know we have another little piece of that question, which is, how can we appeal to those who have profited? And maybe we can just save that part for the discussion after we move to Dawn's answer to the next question, which is, what do you see, Dawn, as being some of the biggest challenges facing us? I know we've already spoken about some of that, but how and why do you think the transition movement can provide a solution?
Well, I think it's really important to look at the many challenges we're facing, and we know that there are many, as being all deeply interconnected and part of the same thing. If we take a kind of long view and looking at what's happening in our world right now, we see that we live in completely unprecedented times. People have never, at least as far as we know, never lived in the ways that we currently live now. Flying around on airplanes, communicating via the internet, consuming large amounts of resources from all over the planet, brought to us by the global extractive economy. And it simply can't continue. And I think, what we're seeing right now is a crisis of modern civilization, that our systems are starting to break down under the weight of their own speed and complexity, their own misalignment with the natural limits of the planet, and with kind of the our natural way of living that's been deeply ingrained in us through hundreds of thousands of years. We're beings of community, and we live in a more fractured way than ever before. We're beings of immediate presence, and our whole world is incredibly abstracted. So I think, what we're seeing in our political systems, in our economic system, in our health system, with climate change, all of these things are connected to this crisis of modern civilization. And one of our biggest problems is that most people don't see an alternative. Most people are aware that, I think at some level, that the direction we're heading in is a dead end. That it is leading us to the edge of a cliff. But we don't see an alternative that is credible in its scale. to answering these challenges. And so I think we find a lot of people are in despair, apathy, bargaining, all Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages of grief. But that we are moving towards greater and greater acceptance that this is our situation. You know, I said before that I think our movement is still in the early phases of its development. I think we will see more and more people getting interested in different ways of living, different ways forward for society, and bringing the support and the resources necessary to grow that work over time. So I think what we need to do is to keep doing what we're doing and building these alternatives, these replicable models of fairer and more sustainable economy, of local and regional food systems where that food is produced ecologically in harmony with nature, of greater civic participation, and people claiming their power to help shape the world that they want to see. So I think we need to keep doing that, and hopefully some of these larger systems will come into alignment to support that. I think that here in the United States and probably in many other countries around the world, we need to see large-scale government action, something like a Green New Deal, to help restore hope and some kind of vision of the future. But if we expect that government is going to do the whole thing for us, one, we're likely to be sadly mistaken. And two, top-down one-size-fits-all solutions are likely to just deepen existing inequalities, not to bring about the kind of world that we want to see. Maybe we address climate change, but what we're living in is a climate apartheid, not a just transition that we want to see. And I think also top-down, one-size-fits-all policies are likely to spark massive backlash against them. That we need to bring people along, that people need to want this change. It needs to happen in every household. It needs to happen on every block, every street, every neighborhood around the world if we're going to get to net zero carbon emissions. And we are going to create the more just and regenerative world that we want to see.
Wow, thank you, Don. Yes. I just noticed somebody in the chat was saying I didn't see any work being done in the area that they checked. And I just want to, just encourage anyone and everyone that is looking into their area to see what's going on with transition. If they don't see anything, it's start something. It's in your hands. This is a movement run by us, by the people. And so it's up to you to start that transition work in your town if it's not already happening, and please do join if it is happening. We are growing and we're evolving. So the next question to kind of fill out our time together is we're just going to have a little bit of a discussion around what's inspiring about this movement, and also what are the challenges. I know we've spoken to some of that in what's been said, and I'll start this off by just saying the thing that's inspiring to me about transition, and the reason why I got involved is, my background is in health and in wellness work, and spiritual practices. And I was so encouraged by seeing, I looked at many other movements, and I was so encouraged by seeing that transition really included and allowed for the human dimension of this movement, of this work, that we understand that in order to shift and to change, it's not just about, it is about the tools, it is about everything that needs to be done on the ground, it is about the gardens and the alternative energy and the economy, but it's also about how we shift our consciousness, how we shift our hearts, how we shift our mindset. And Dawn spoke to that real kind of peripherally, talking about the grief, that we are experiencing as a collective, and the trauma that we've experienced as a collective from the systems that we have are experiencing the fallout of. And that's real. And to have time for the heart, have time for the consciousness of who we are as human beings is essential part of the transition movement, because we realize that we need to shift our mindset as well as our communities and how we practice living on the earth together. So that's what's very inspiring to me, and why I'm here. It's also a challenge how to shift, because that is culture change. That's real, it's inch by inch work. So I'm just going to open it up to the panel, and we have, maybe about 10 minutes left here. So briefly, just, maybe you can speak to something that has inspired you or that's challenging you around transition that you'd like to share. And go ahead, and whoever wants to pipe in there.
I can start. Yeah. So for me, well, there is quite a lot that inspires me, and it's challenging because stepping out, to be open for change, it's a work of challenge myself all the time. But there is something that I've been sitting with these last months. There is this that I've been studying quite a lot about that. It is about, this thing of culture. There is the different cultures that we have, that is so important to maintain the diversity. We are not very good. We are super good in reading and between the lines, and to make assumptions, because we are used to, in our cultures, to have these codes. But when you are really working internationally, when we are, for example, supporting each other as hubs internationally, how can we be in a space where you strip out all that kind of noise, and we find a place of deep listening and truth, still maintaining our identities? For me, this is the big challenge. How can we connect deeply with someone from the other side of the world, supporting what is the human essence that we can be in a space of security, at the same time maintaining the individual cultures? For me, this is something that I've been really thinking about, that I think it's one of the most important things when you are creating this, what is us, not othering, all the time. What is us? Because othering is normally because you don't have the same codes. So we need to stop with this othering. And how can we do that? So I leave you with that. It inspires me as well, that question.
Thank you.
I can go next, unless, Monica, you're chomping at the bit. So I think what inspires me the most about the transition movement is ordinary people stepping up to the challenges of our time. You know, if we look at the big picture, it's very overwhelming, intimidating, it's very complex. And we could very easily just say, you know, oh, those other people, they know more than I do. They have more experience in this. I'm just going to live my life and do my own thing. And, you know, hopefully somebody else will figure it out. But I'm just incredibly inspired that there are hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people all over the world who are saying, no, the cavalry is not coming. We are the ones that we have been waiting for. And, you know, I'm going to take whatever little piece of this, because obviously we can't do it all. I'm going to take whatever little piece of this that really makes me come alive, that, you know, that touches my deepest interests, that touches my heart, that fires me up and inspires me. And I'm going to pull on that little thread and follow that thread and see where it leads. And, you know, I think that, you know, speaking for myself as somebody who's done that, you know, it's totally changed my life. And it's really, you know, brought incredible joy, growth, connection, meaning, purpose. And I know from talking to other transitioners and people involved in this work around the world that they feel the same way, that there's nothing that they would rather be doing with their lives, even though that this is so difficult and that we're, you know, chronically under-resourced and there's never enough time and all that. But, you know, on the other hand, you know, we all can do so much. You know, even if we don't have a lot, we can grow a garden. We can reach out to our neighbors. We can create something beautiful. And that's what continues to drive me forward in all of this. The potential for creating something, you know, absolutely beautiful in our world, and historic, and that we can leave as a legacy for generations to come.
Wonderful, thank you. Monica, do you have any?
Yeah, what inspires me about transition, there are so many things, but I believe that first thing is that it makes sense for me, you know, like when you look to your future and you look to the things you are and this amazing opportunity of being on this earth, on this time, you look at that and you can't be paralyzed by the problems that we are living. We have to look at it and we have to live it and we have to learn. And to do it, I think we have to have this positive way of thinking and this empowerment of doing your future and doing your day by day. And I think transition brings this awareness, this abundance, and this beauty of being empowered of your own life, you know. And this is something that comes from inside. And this is amazing because when you talk about that, transition really brings us something that's spiritual, that's from inside. Yes, it is. Because nobody can bring you empowerment. Only you can feel this way. But when you look and you see some things that can show you that's possible, you look at that, wow, if this girl did, why didn't me, right? So that's the thing. Is if ordinary people do, why not me? You know? And this other thing that is amazing about transition is this kind of inclusion. when you look at everybody is necessary, you know, every knowledge is important. There is no more important or less important. Everybody is important. Every view is perfect. And this connection of different views make the different way that we have to follow. And this place of talking that Philippa was saying, that's from people from everywhere talking about things and stepping back of their assumptions and looking to what the other is saying, really, not with my assumptions, but what are you really saying? What do you want really to say to me, you know? And look at that and think, wow, maybe I'm not that correct, you know? Maybe my solution is not this, but how can we connect and make it together? And so this for me is amazing, and is a place that I found on transition, and yeah, it's wonderful. I love that.
Oh, thank you. I'm feeling so re-inspired to transition. And I just want to also encourage again, everybody that is here, you know, that's on the chat, you know, just to get involved if you're not already, and to know that you have a network of support. If you're not sure who is in your own local community, just know that you can reach out to, you know, to Transition US or Transition Network, and connect with people there to see how to get support to do this. And if I might be so bold as to say, I noticed in the chat, you know, some people were talking about pioneers and Indigenous voices, which I'm really is very close to my heart personally. And I kind of also, you know, feel like this whole movement, if I might be so bold, is to say that it is kind of like the decolonization of our systems, because it is reconnecting us to our local environment and to our relationships that are around us. And that is an Indigenous way of living, is knowing the land that you're on, knowing each other, really connecting deeply with your local environment and what works for you and your community. And so I'm really kind of playing around with calling it that. Welcome feedback on that. And so we're going to just go into our closing remarks, and we just have only 1 minute each, just to close out this session before I hand it back to Jim. So just 1 minute each of you to go ahead and what you'd like to end us with. Let's start with you, Don.
Okay, I was just typing into the chat that Transition US is actually hosting our year-end celebration tonight that we're calling Rising to the Challenges of Our Time, and you all are invited. So if you're not here on Zoom and can't access the chat, feel free to go to our website, transitionus.org, to find that. While you're there, please do sign up for our mailing list. That's the best way to get in touch and keep aware of all the different programs and projects and campaigns and gatherings, events that we're doing, and how you can get involved with all of that. You know, we really, I think the time to really lay it all on the line and get involved, get off the sidelines is now. You know, we don't want to wait until things get any worse in our world today to start doing this. And so, you know, whatever sparks your inspiration, your creativity, I would say, you know, follow that thread and see where it leads you, and do something to help our world because it needs it.
Thank you, Don. Okay, Philippa, 1 minute. We gotta wrap up here soon.
You have this scarcity of time all the time.
Yeah.
I just I just wanted to thank you for this, because it inspires me as well. And I think it's I feel alive by speaking about this. I guess that's my role in this. So that's something that is giving me the assurance that I'm doing the right thing. And another thing that is that I'm at service. So whoever wants to explore, to get support, to challenge, I am at service. So you can always contact me.
Thank you. Maybe you could put your email in the chat. And Monica, 1 minute closing.
Yes, I really think that thank you very much for being here. It was really inspiring. That's Filipa said, it's really truth. I'm really inspired by you all. And what I really think is that if I can say something, I say, look to your richness and empower yourself and do things. There's no small thing. I think that there is a thought that's a group of small people doing small things together is going to change the world. This is happen all the time. So this is what we are. And when I say we, it's not only transition movement, it's we. We all can do something. And there is no small thing. And yeah, I think that. And if you can tell somebody that you think that feels empowered and you can most and show them they can empower themselves, please do it, because this awakening is the most interesting thing we can ever have. That's it.
Thank you.
That's what I think.
Wow, thank you so much. And we'll see you in the chat. Hopefully our panelists can join us. And I'm going to hand it over to Jim now, and just want to give a big thank you to everybody that's here and everybody who sees it in the future. And our panelists, thank you so much for your time and energy and work. Incredible work. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jul and Monica, Filipa, Don. This has been brilliant and heartwarming and inspiring. And I remember when Filipa was on Humanity Rising last time, I saluted Filipa, your passion of just feeling the future so strongly within you that you quit your job and just went for it. And that's just the bottom line, how life should be lived. And Monica, I want to salute you. I mean, to be pregnant with twins and to go off to Norwich for a transition weekend from Brazil. Lady, you are one powerful woman. And you know, it reminds me of Rilke, you know, that the future speaks ruthlessly through us. You know, that's how you change the world. And Don, similarly, your clarity and your passion, it's just, it's wonderful to behold. And Jul, we're going to have to talk, because I'd like to, you know, have you back and do a deeper dive into the transition movement next year, because it's so powerfully inspiring. I didn't know until after the session began that today, December 8th, marks the 40th anniversary of the killing of John Lennon. John Lennon was killed 40 years ago today, and I'm a huge Beatles fan. I'm a 60s guy, and for me, it's the Beatles, and then there's everybody else. And of all the Beatles, John Lennon, boy, was my hero. And I can still remember the day I was in Cambridge, actually, and seeing the news, hearing the news that he'd been shot. I just thought, my God, who would shoot John Lennon? And so I thought I would honor you all and honor Lennon, John Lennon, to close by just simply reading the lyrics of Imagine. It is what the transition movement is all about. It's an act of imagination. And you all know the words, you all know the song. I'll just read the poetry because it says everything that needs to be said about the true nature of humankind and the future that is before us if we could only remember who we truly are. Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us and the world will be as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I am not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us and the world will be as one. 40 years ago today, that light was snuffed out. And 40 years on, John Lennon was right. He was not the only one. There were over 1,000 communities in the transition network alone in over 50 countries. And if we would move into the world and move into next year as an act of imagination for which we're willing to give our lives, we would change the world. Because as Rilke said so powerfully, the future is speaking ruthlessly through us. You could feel that today. And each and every one of our presenters. And so I want to salute everything that all of you are doing. It's the hope of the future. It's the courage to be on the front lines of change at a critical moment in human affairs. So thank you all. And then tomorrow, we're going to finish up with a celebration with Claire Dubois, who's the founder of Tree Sisters, on trees, the deep meaning of trees that are celebrated at this time of year. Tomorrow's Hanukkah. Beyond that is the solstice, and beyond that is Christmas, and beyond that is New Year's. We're going into the holy days. And let us imagine a better world. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you in the after session chat group, those of you who can join us. And all of you, I hope we see you again tomorrow. Same time, same station, 5 o'clock p.m. Central European Time here on Zoom. Blessings, everyone. Thank you.